of the lessons learned and changes made during the last few years of uncertainty will be continued when the uncertainty ends, or do you think it will go back to a lean optimization strategy?
I think it's a very good question. I think companies will have different approaches. Companies who, from a financial position, are in a really good space and have really good leadership, I believe will adopt agile strategies, which mixes the lean and agile responsiveness to the market. So I believe they won't necessarily go all the way back to the bare bones of the lean principles anymore, because that will put a lot of risk in the supply chain. But there will be many organizations, and that was really why I called the last statement, that may be deceived by the fact that this is finished and gone and will go back to the lean practices to reduce cost quite significantly. I can easily see that will be the approach, but the wise approach from my perspective will be to find somewhere with a good balance that you have the agility to respond, you reduce the cost, but you have the agility to respond. That's really my perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Amir. I think this question also aligned with what Professor Quadis presented earlier with the American so-called investigations. We can see from the results that supply chain resilience actually kind of suppress lean and agility in a way. That means if you build up your supply chain resilience in a way, it may bring more benefits than relying entirely on lean and agility. So will you be able to supplement a little bit, Professor Quadis, in this regard?
Well, that's one of the studies that we have done. The results are quite interesting, but I'll really direct my question to Amir, if I may, because he has a lot of experience. So Amir, from practical perspective, can you validate what we have found in empirical study? That resilience really has the power to overpower agility and leanness.
Yeah, 100%. From my perspective, that concept is really important. But Dr. Ghodus, having been both part of the academy and then industry, what I've noticed, one of the gaps that we've had in the industry in particular over the last few years has been that the resilience has been really in the bottom agenda of many of the executives. They haven't necessarily built the resilience as they should have, because building the resilience sometimes brings complexity and cost. And I believe that hasn't been really on top of the agenda of the executives over the last few years. And definitely, if the supply chain had those principles in place and business continuity plans in place, that would have helped. The trend that I've seen quite significantly over the last 12 to 18 months is that all the companies have started dusting off their old business continuity plans that we probably established 20 years ago, to go back and say, okay, how now can we build the resilience in our supply chain, review those continuity plans, and have a supply chain that can deal with these uncertainties. That's really how I see it. I think it was undermined for a while, but I think it's back on the agenda quite significantly.
It's good.
Yeah, thank you, Amir. So now we have a question from Tani again for Dr. Kim. So the question is, I noticed that there were lots of checks and cross-checks in the temperature control transportation of vaccines. Were these mainly manually completed by people, or was there an increased usage in technologies such as IoT to assist in this checking?
Basically, all the vaccine has the GPS, can control the temperature, then alert to the control tower. But once we got the notice, then we need to check the physical packages, where some of the cold air leaking or package damages. Then we align with the control tower. There was no the packaging, the damages happened. But for the alarm, if the GPS got pressure from the upper box, and they also give us the range changes. So the number of the temperature, I mean, normal temperature checking, the devices cannot really measure -70 degrees, but the GPS can do. Then, we do just as the backup, we do the physical package check, no issues. Then all the inspection is done in the low temperature warehouses. So meaning we got a pre-notice, then they check it in the transit areas. Then once everything's clear, then we just spread out to the vaccination center without any issue. Since if anything happened, then we do injection to the people. Then I don't know what will happen. I mean, each crisis. I mean, and also diseases.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kim. I think, as you point out, timing is very important, and so-called error proof is also very important. So probably automation or technology-oriented checking will be quite important in this kind of arrangement.
Yep.
Okay, so are there any other questions? If not, actually, I have a couple of questions for Professor Quadis and also the other two speakers. So
I have a question, please. Just a short question.
Sure.
Okay, to Dr. Kim.
Yes.
Dr. Kim, you pointed out that United States and the trade between Korea, logistic trade between Korea and the United States, there was a change. Before it used to be United States, the trade volume between Korea and United States used to be more. But now it has shifted to China. What trade terms or policies or changes that has led to this?
I just recall that our global companies, they went to China for the manufacturing, which was starting from the 1980s. Then, all the raw materials, used to become to Korea, then we export. But this is, become the third-party training, meaning we have the manufacturers in the China or in some, Asia country. Then, that is sold to the Korea headquarters by papers, then export from China to the US or some other country. So meaning, as I mentioned, over 30% of the trading has been increased. That is the trading terms number of the increase. But when I look at the real, the tonnage of the trading, the logistics, it does not really match, since the trading, the money transfer is through Korea, then make the revenue generation, but the actual is not, the go by the Korea origin. So the one of the reason is, I think it's pretty much similar to the globalization in the 1980s. The U.S. manufacturers go to the Asian countries for looking for the low cost and the tax benefit. So that applies to Korea as well. It was just starting from the Japan, then Korea, and also now a lot of the manufacturing in China is moving to South Asia country, such as the Vietnam and Cambodia and Myanmar.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. I hope Dr. Kim has answered your questions. Now I can see that Win has raised his hand. So Win, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Char. And first of all, thanks, Professor Quadis and Dr. Kim and Dr. Hasami for your excellent and inspiring presentation. I'm glad to have two questions. One will be directed to Amir and Dr. Kim, and one to Professor Quadis. Now, to the industries presenter here, my question really is, previously when Professor Mohammad Quadis presented his presentation on the supply chain resilience model, how to manage resilience, right? So from your practical management in your firm, how many % of those factor in the theoretical model you experience in practice? And among them, what are the most important factors? The question to Professor Quadis is, based on the two presentations from the two industry speakers, when you compare with your model, do you see anything that you need to add in, for example? Thank you.
Dr. Kim, you want to go first?
I think I believe pretty much aligned, but in the real field, there is unexpected factors. Then change all the situation. I see a slide that one of the important factor in the logistics is the speed, but however, ocean is quite okay, but in the air transportation wise, a lot of uncertainty happened, and we cannot really align with the theory or academic data. For example, I had one open space 2 days ago. I had we are selling about $17 per kg to US. Then we opened the space to customer, and the customer gave us that volume 30 tons. Then we could move it because of the different size of the configuration in the ULD. Those kind of factors in the company for the revenue wise, but the operation wise, since not only consider the cost, but also consider the networks. Since the more profit and more revenue generation, we need the network optimization. That also relates to the time, not only for the transit of the cargo, but also the equipment, includes the transportation as well.
So Amir, any?
Yeah, I technically agree with most of the items that Dr. Kim mentioned. The recovery stage of the resilience, and that step of the recovery is the most critical one. When I look at that and see how many of those are actually being adopted, maybe I could say maybe only 50%. And that's really where I see the gap between the academy and the industry. So I think there is definitely opportunity for establishing those principles further across the industry, because there's definitely room for improvement. Going back to what Dr. Kim mentioned, when you go to the industry applications, there is a fair bit of gray area that applies, so it won't be very black and white. There are gray areas, individual items, and really that's the area that we need to be able to cover to build that resilience across the industry supply chain.
Thank you, Amir. Professor Quadis.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, and that's why I asked Amir about how does he see the power of resilience in his from his experience. Well, my presentation was very generic. I didn't really zoom into an industry. Dr. Kim dealt with freight and all those things, and Amir, of course, dealt with bottle industry and those things. But I definitely have seen some aspects of many factors that Amir presented. There was a talk of leanness, there's talk of agility, which I covered. And also, Amir now talked about the recovery. So those are important steps, important aspects of supply chain resilience. I've also seen in Amir's presentation the aspects of relationship. It looks like that they have a very good relationship with their customer and suppliers, with some things that we promote. And that's also one of the significant factors in any kind of SCREEN modeling. So definitely there is synergy between what I presented and what I learned from my two industry colleagues. But having said that, I agree what Amir said. There is a gap between what we in academia we practice and promote in academia and what industry really practices. As I highlighted before, that in academia, and Amir would know it, so Dr. Kim, that we deal with theory quite a bit because that's our heart. Everything has to be theory driven. That really helps structure our mind, structure our concept, and so on. And being in industry, sometimes you probably do things in ad hoc basis because that's how you have to do when things are not doing very greatly and things are very critical now during pandemic. You really throw away a textbook and do things which is really more relevant, more practical, and more doable in the situation. So definitely there are synergies, but I think we all has to learn from each other. Industry has to learn from academia how we are progressing, and we also have to see how industry is practicing. All those things that we really promote in academia.
Thank you, Professor Quadras, for the so-called for the elaboration. Now, because of time, I originally have a few questions, but I can see that Win also put up his hand again. Okay, so Win.
Thank you, Charles. Just a very quick one. It's not a question though. Thanks a lot, Professor Quadras and Dr. Kim and Dr. Hashemi. It's just a comment. Based on your responses, I would like to propose, after this workshop, I would like to propose a kind of, a joint project where Curtin, RMIT, PNU, UPS, as well as Aurora, we don't have to rely on traditional method like survey per se, but we can do a, in-depth case study, a couple of case studies. To drill down on the topic that we discussed today, because for me it looked like that theory on one side, industry practices on the other can complement each other very well. The question is we need to work out a plausible model based on phases and things like that, and that would be hopefully contribute a lot. Thanks so much. I will approach each and every of you later. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Win. So because of time, so I probably just not asking the question because it might take some time to address. So I would just take this opportunity to thank the three speakers, distinguished speakers, for their valuable sharing of experience. If I may, I would just try to summarize what we have learned from the three speakers and trying to leverage these wisdoms to help us to build resilience in supply chain. So thank you very much to Professor Quadras to give us a very comprehensive overview of what supply chain resilience is. He basically touches all the concepts, the drivers, and the factors of so-called involved, and that sets the scene for practitioners to know what we should look at. And I think at this stage, because of time, he might not be able to suggest, for example, a plan. What should we do first? And what kind of activities can be involved? For example, should we kind of categorize the risk first or trying to build our capabilities? But I think, as Win said, if there's a joint project, we might be able to explore this area. And then thank you to Dr. Kim to provide us a very detailed analysis of the trend. I think this information basically help us to think about how to cater for the changes and then build up our resilience in that regard. After all, whether we're able to be resilient is very much data-driven. Professor Quadras already pointed out. So analyzing the current trends and gathering the necessary data is a very important start. So so thanks to Dr. Kim to provide us with that perspective. And then, of course, thanks to Amir to show us the kind of measures that the industry practically is doing. I particularly like the so-called compressed ITP process, which aims to increase the responsibility of the industry towards this kind of challenges, right? And also the more rigorous planning process and also the supply management optimizations. These are really, really valid approach to enhance the responsiveness of industry. But of course, in the long run, if we're going to build the supply chain resilience, we might also have to look at the so-called readiness preparation and also the recovery aspect, as Professor Quadras pointed out. So again, I echo Win's valuable suggestion that may be a joint project among the academics and the practitioners can give very valuable insights to the academia as well as the industry. So with this note, I once again thank the three guest speakers for sharing their valuable experience, and I believe all the audience will have picked up certain so-called ideas and insights from the speakers. So thanks very much. And now I hand it over back to you, Win.
Thank you, Charles. So just give me 1 sec. So yeah, so ladies and gentlemen and distinguished speaker, colleague and students. So first of all, thanks so much for your time today to come to the e-workshop on building supply chain resilience. Today we have an excellent speakers and discussion, like Charles, my colleague, mentioned, from Professor Quadros, from Dr. Kim, as well as from Dr. Hashemi. There is a very excellent plan of theoretical and practical perspective together, and we all learned a lot from this, and we all agree that there are still lots of work to do in order to, let's say, align between what we learn in theories as well as what we practice in reality toward the ultimate aims of, managing the disruption in the supply chain and deriving better performance, especially during the chaotic times that we are experiencing right now. So on this note, I'd like to acknowledge the great support from the Australian governments, Australia, in particular, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the Australia Korea Foundations, RMIT University, in particular, the School of Accounting, Information System and Supply Chains, as well as the Graduate School of International Studies from Busan National University in South Korea. Thanks so much for your help and support. And without those, this great workshop will not be a reality. So on this note, thanks again, and please take care of yourself and have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.